Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the iHeartRadio network, the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports have been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France, and you good old boys up in Canada. I want you to know, because all that hate mail I've been getting, I've been working on my Canada, our home and native land. Laugh all you want, Big C. I did tell you my good old boys from Vegas told me no need to buy those airline tickets up to Canada. I'm sorry that I spoiled the goose, Big C, but how's it going for you good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave, Big C?
Well, Charlton, we got it figured out. Down in the South, we got one team that's going to participate in Lord Stanley's Cup, even though you jinxed that one from up north.
Yeah.
I'm not going to travel up north, which I guarantee you that. But, looking forward to a great Stanley Cup getting started. Pittsburgh Penguins will be the first team in 20 years to repeat as back-to-back champions in the Stanley Cup. This is the Predators' first opportunity to participate for the Stanley Cup, so it should be a great series nevertheless.
Yeah.
It would be quite interesting, though, if the Predators do win. They're number 16 seed, the lowest seed left in the playoffs, and be the lowest seed to win the Stanley Cup, Joe.
And Big C, isn't that amazing when you can be the 16th seed and you push it into double overtime? That shows people how exciting actually hockey is. I know they appreciate it up in Canada the same way you good old boys down south appreciate a cool sip of moonshine. Them good old boys like putting it on ice, Big C. Talk about the parity in the NHL. When people say in the NBA, we don't want to have parity. We want two dominant teams. Or in the NFL, they want a dominant team in the AFC. They want a dominant team in the NFC. You just said the 16th seed was almost in Lord Stanley's Cup, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they are, Charlton. And when you think about that's what sports is all about. Everybody having an opportunity.
Yeah.
And the Predators being a 16th seed going into the playoffs, and to make it the Stanley Cup, that's a tremendous feat. It shows that in athletics, being hot at the right time is all that counts. You can go back to the Raiders, years ago, back to 1980.
Yeah.
I believe they were a wild card team, and they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
When they beat the Philadelphia Eagles.
Under Jim Plunkett.
Parity, in sports, it's something that's solid. We look at the NBA, and there's only two super teams in the NBA. Everybody else is chasing.
Yeah.
And everybody is trying to put teams together to combat those two teams of Cleveland and Oakland.
Yeah.
And neither one of those teams are in a supermarket. And even when you look at the NHL, Nashville is actually twice the size of a market that Pittsburgh is, television-wise, Charlton. So when you think about that Nashville is such a large market compared to Pittsburgh, but, it's also a home of country music.
Yeah.
Which lends a lot of that interest, as far as the music industry coming out of there. But, when you got small markets representing both of these pastimes going into that championship round in the NHL and the NBA, you don't have a top 5 market, a top 10 market participating in either one of them, Charles.
Well, Big C, what's so important about that? I just want to say this segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. Something I was talking to some good old boys here in Northern California, and everybody's hyped about Golden State and Cleveland coming up. And again, I'm going to tell you, some good old boys from Las Vegas, they were right about the NHL, but this series is going to 6 games. Golden State's going to get on top again. We might even have a 4-time where they meet. That's just what I hear. Who knows if it's right or wrong, Big C. But I like what you said. You said something about the market size. If you took the Nashville market versus Pittsburgh, it's a bigger area. And there are a lot of people down south that, football's king no matter where you go. But I want to get your opinion. How has hockey come into the southern part of the United States, where a lot of you good old boys only like football, and they become so passionate about it in Nashville? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about it, Charlton, you've had the Carolina Hurricane win a Stanley Cup. You've had the Tampa Bay Thunder win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
And now you have the Nashville Predators in chase of Lord Stanley's Cup. They've infiltrated the southern part of the United States and made a game where normally everybody down here who used ice went into a cocktail that got people in there playing the football.
Yeah, that's funny.
And so they've infused, having good times playing hockey. Matter of fact, a couple games ago, you had the offensive lineman from the Tennessee Titans at the game, you have a small market competitive team,
yeah,
it really doesn't get the exposure that the large markets of the New Yorks,
yeah,
of the Dallas, they don't get that. And so when was the last time you saw the Tennessee Titans on television playing football in the NFL in a primetime game? You don't get that.
Yeah.
Oakland Raiders get more notoriety than what they do. Even San Francisco, when they're not winning,
yeah,
gets more publicity than the Tennessee Titans. So when you look at it, and fans want to be a part of the main stage, they want to be seen on television. They want to show everybody in America that they can support their teams.
Yeah.
And that's what you got down in the southern region. As we spoke about, Tennessee has already been to a Super Bowl, but they lost to the Rams.
Yeah.
Now you have the Predators in Stanley's Cup. So when you think about this state of Tennessee and how much impact it's had on the national stage as far as the two major professional sports they have, they're second to none, Charlton.
Yeah, and when you think about that, Big C, you just talked about the last time they were down there, they had that good old boy Steve McNair out of Alcorn State that took them to the Super Bowl, and they lost to the Rams by, I think it was about a foot when they caught the ball on like the 1 foot line. But that's a great area. We think about the South, you think Tennessee football. University of Tennessee, the Volunteers are great. Now you have some great football with the NFL. They have a young team and an up-and-coming team down there in Tennessee should be great. But now them good old boys also have the NHL. We talked about that earlier this week, Big C, how we talk about perception. And we talked about college football, how the SEC is perceived as the best league out there. But the ACC was 4-1 against the SEC this year. We talked about teams that won national championships. Isn't it amazing? You just brought it up earlier. We think about California being a championship state. We think about maybe New York, but New York doesn't win a championship in anything, Big C. We think about Texas and Florida. But for Nashville to turn that around for Tennessee, really good. Good news for the good old boys down south. I also want to just say, for the people in Canada, this is something that because we pay a lot of homage to Canada, and mainly I love to sing Old Canada because of their health care. They take care of their old, they take care of the young, they're poor, they're rich. They take care of everybody because of their health care. Hopefully the United States can at least follow that example down the stretch, Big C. But I love thanking, a lot of people who love all sports because that's what runs, Big C Sports. We talk about sports and everything, but I'd still be remiss if I became a dumb person today and didn't ask you a little bit about what POTUS is doing. I think they showed him on TV. He actually pushed a prime minister from another country. I didn't get the whole story, Big C, because I was out doing some work. But he actually pulled some guy by the arm just so he could get in front for a photo shoot. Has POTUS lost his mind, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, you gotta ask, did he have a mind to start with?
Yeah.
When you talk about a child as Andrew, that's what you expect from second, third graders trying to get in front of a photo op.
Yeah.
I want to be up front, and there he was. So egotistical that he had to be in front, that he pushes another prime minister to the side and jumps up in front of the line, and then he straightens up his tie and his jacket. But that's inappropriate behavior from a professional leader of the free world. But I guess we were so used to, as a nation, of professionalism and courtesy in the past, and all of that has been tossed out the window with the current administration that we have. And I guess it's just no holds barred now. Whatever happens, happens. Because the unexpected is the expected in this current regime that we have in the White House, Trump. And I mean, from the kids being in trouble, to the president being in trouble, to his staff being in trouble, it's every day. Every day I keep waiting on one of these new job bills that he went out and lied to the public about how he was going to bring jobs back to America. I keep waiting on, he talked about this Trump care, how it's going to be better than Obamacare, but yet he's had nothing to show how financially impactful it's going to be to the homes of America. Even this new tax law, he showed nothing as far as how it will benefit Americans going forward. So, it's been a lot of smoke, there's been a lot of executive orders, and it's been a lot of, posturing in front of cameras. But we haven't had anything that is going to benefit Americans yet. We've had every one of these Muslim bans that he's put up tossed out by judges all over the United States.
And that's...
So it doesn't make any difference how far he takes it, even to the Supreme Court.
It's always...
He'll always come back to his rhetoric that he used on the campaign trail, the racist rhetoric that he used. That's what will always come back to bite him. It's not what he says now. It's what his original intent was. He can't change his original intent. And so anybody who argues against it it will always be there, Charles.
Yeah, and that's funny when you have him representing the United States around the country as the world leaders. They were actually in Italy, and the Italian Air Force did a flyby, and they had it in red and green, the colors of the Italian flag, Big C, and they were all standing around marveling at these airplanes that were flying to show their national power and how they can represent, the Defense Department for their countries. And just to have Donald Trump standing there, and all the world leaders know it. I'm not saying any human being is perfect, but here's a guy that became president, even though he bragged about grabbing a woman by the vagina and doing whatever he wants to them because he's rich and he can get away with it. There has to be, as far as attitude and respect, there can't be a lot of respect for him, Big C, but I still think America is the land of the free and the home of the brave, and we shall always stay that way. Talking about the land of the free and the home of the brave, and one of the biggest things we love in the United States is the NFL. And pro football like anybody else, Big C. I want to ask you this question. Running around, we talked about yesterday how Goodell has decided he's going to be a little bit more lenient on players and their dancing. I mean, back in the day, I think Elmo Wright was one of the first guys to ever celebrate Big C touchdowns. Your thoughts?
Actually was, Charlton. I was looking at a clip that they had Keyshawn Johnson doing, and he went to Billy White Shoes Johnson. Billy White Shoes Johnson didn't initiate the end zone dance in the NFL. Elmo Wright did this, Charlton, back in 1971. Elmo Wright was a rookie wide receiver out of the University of Houston, #1 draft pick.
Yeah.
The Kansas City Chiefs wore number 17. He initiated the end zone dance. Matter of fact, Andy Don Meredith, who did Monday Night Football along with Howard Cosell and the late I can't think of his name at the moment, the running back that played with the Giants. He called it the Dickie Doo Dance.
The Dickie Doo Dance, yeah. Yeah.
And so that's where the end zone dance came from, Frank Gifford, the late Frank Gifford.
Yeah.
That's where the end zone dance came from, Charlton, in the NFL. But the modern day players, still they only know what they've seen on ESPN, and they remember seeing, Billy White Shoes Johnson, who started out with the Houston Oilers, ended his career with the Atlanta Falcons, and he was a great dancer during the time. But, he was introduced in the early 70s, before a lot of those guys were born. So they knew nothing about it, Charlton. But, it's been something that's part of football for a long time. Football became the no-fun league when they took it out. But the only thing that I worry about is that they still give officials discretion to still throw a flag on the play.
Really?
Which I think is wrong. The fans pay too much money to take away any part of the excitement that they may endure during the game. And scoring touchdowns is part of the game, and you don't get in there that often.
Yeah.
Everybody's not going to be like a Barry Sanders where you've been there before and you just
hand the ball over. Yeah.
This has been the makeup of so many players over decades, Charlton, that they've been able to do these things and get by with them and add to their excitement about being on the field.
Yeah, that's a great thing about the excitement on the field. And when you think about it, too, just adding on to what you were saying, Big C, when I look at the great players now, we talked about the Kaepernick thing and how a lot of times, and I just got to bring it up because I still hear some people in the Bay Area saying, yeah, he didn't stand for the troops, as if they just don't read at all. And I think about some of the same thing that happened to...
Johnson, let me ask one question.
Yeah.
All of those people who say that Colin Kaepernick didn't stand for the troops, how many of them went and signed up for voluntary entry into any military service to go fight with those troops? And that's the question I ask. All of those guys that said Colin Kaepernick did not stand up for the troops, how many of those were in selective services voluntarily to go out and assist those troops?
Well, we know none of them have, Big C, but I just think it's ironic how it talks about if you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeat it. And you brought up, there were many other quarterbacks. I think the Oakland Raiders under the late Al Davis signed one of the first African-American quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. And outside of that, Big C, there have been a lot of guys who were marginalized, and they were great players, but they were not signed to play quarterback in the league. So what's happening to Kaepernick, it may just be about racism currently, but it's always been that way in the league. They just don't want black men being smart. They want you dumb, big, and fast. If you say anything that bucks the current, then oftentimes they'll teach the good old boys a lesson like they did the slaves back in the day. They put out the whip, and they give them a couple of lashes, Big C. Now that same whip is called a paycheck. If you don't give someone a multi-million-dollar paycheck, that's the same thing as the good old boys used to do back in the day. And I'm not saying that flippantly because I know that this still goes on, and as long as we have opportunity to talk about real talk we're not going to be like the mainstream and try to point out something that's a falsehood. It wasn't about the truth. It was about standing up for Black Lives Matter. But I want to stay in the Bay Area. You talked about Al Davis, and he was one of the first owners to hire African Americans. Could the new regime of the Raiders, and I hate saying the Las Vegas Raiders, but you think about their big four. You have Carr, you have Lynch at running back, beast mode now. You have Cooper and Crabtree. Is that a formidable offense for the Raiders to unseat the Patriots? We talk about the NFL, 1 and 2 dominant teams, 2 in the AFC, 2 in the NFC. Big C, with your knowledge of the history of NFL, can those 4 guys be the equalizer to put the Patriots on the back seat? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they got to get that running game going with beast mode, and have it working late in the year.
Yeah.
But, also it's about staying healthy. You saw how good the Raiders were until they lost Carr.
Yeah.
You backup quarterback, everybody always thinks gravely of them. And then all of a sudden when they get in the game and can't perform, you saw that last year with the Raiders.
Yeah.
When their backup quarterback was called upon, when Carr broke a finger,
yeah.
they had nothing.
Yeah.
And so that's the key. It's always about being healthy, Charlton. Can you stay healthy throughout the 16 games and the playoffs?
Yeah.
That's the key. Anybody can challenge anybody. We see that New England constantly retools every year.
Yeah.
They bring in players to fit the need for what they have at that moment. They're not projecting out 3-4 years down the road. They're projecting out for the following season.
Yeah.
And so the Raiders have quietly built a solid regime there with the players that they have offensively and defensively. And they're only going to get better.
Yeah.
It's about staying healthy, Charlton. And when you look across the board, Kansas City has one of those teams that is solid. They beat the Raiders twice. Okay?
Yeah.
The Dolphins were up and coming last year. So the AFC, when you look across the board, and you got to look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. When you look at the 3 Bs that they have there, Roethlisberger, Brown, and Bell, those players in the last 3 years have only played 56% of the snaps with each other. Just think about it. They played their entire season together. How good the Steelers would be. So don't count the Steelers out of this equation also.
Yeah. Big C, when you think about counting guys out of the equation, and we talked about that big 4 with the Raiders, I just want to kind of go across the country. You talk about Josh Norman. He had some words on Dez Bryant saying he's just a guy. He doesn't wow you like Odell Beckham Jr. does, and he tries to be a tough guy. So Brown tries to get into the head of a lot of these guys, but the good players is not going to affect them. But I do want to ask you, because the Chicago Bears, they made a move today. I don't know if it's going to matter, but they signed Cruz. Used to play for the Giants, and now he's going to be in Chicago. But Chicago doesn't have an offense, so I don't know if they signed Jerry Rice to come back and play if it make a difference. Can Cruz still be an effective guy, Big C? He had 4,500 yards and 25 touchdowns over his career on 303 catches with the New York Giants. Is he washed up? Is he going to make a difference? Your thoughts, Big C?
He's not washed up, but he's with a team that has no offense.
Yeah.
Victor Cruz may catch 30, 35 balls this year with the Chicago Bears offense. He has nobody to throw the ball to him.
Yeah.
As much as Chicago wants to spend on quarterbacks, and you think about it, they're going to give Glennon, they gave Glennon $47, $48 million.
Ouch.
They're going to give Trubisky $25 million. So basically you have just under $75 million tied up in 2 quarterbacks, Charlton.
Yeah.
And neither one of those quarterbacks can get you 3,000 yards on the regular season.
Yeah.
And neither one of them has been a proven leader. Glennon, as a starter in the NFL, is 1-10 with Tampa Bay.
Wait, hold on. Hold on,
He
Steve.
is 8-4 as a college quarterback.
Did you say Glennon as a starter is 1-10?
Glennon is 1-10 as a starter 3 years ago with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers before they drafted Jameis Winston, but that garnered him a $48 million 3-year contract.
Ouch.
He 1-10 as a starter 3 years ago. Okay.
Well,
he hasn't played in 3 years.
I always thought the Windy City was based on politics, and not that it's cold and windy in Chicago on politics, but I guess the Windy City means it's blowing around the stats and the analytics, and they can't find how bad these guys are before they give them $48 million, Big C. I might get up my cleats, Big C.
Compared to Kaepernick. Kaepernick, yes, he was 1-11 last year.
Yeah.
A very pathetic team in San Francisco, but he threw 18 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions.
Yeah.
Glennon threw no interceptions and no touchdowns.
Wow.
So, but he got him $48 million. You do no touchdowns and no interceptions. You take no snaps and it gets you $48 million.
Well,
Colin Kaepernick ran for his life and still was the second leading rusher on the team, the leading passer, one of the top 3 rated quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah.
And couldn't get a job.
That's a crazy thing. And speaking of a job in the pro sports, sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to that billion-dollar industry. If you need insurance, you need athletic and event insurance, go through Big C Sports with Ben and Mark. They've been around half a century at Big C. We got you covered in all 50 states and several continents around the world, Big C. I just want to say, if you need athletic and event insurance, tweet out the Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. When you bring up the quarterback stats of a player like that, I was thinking about some of the talk of these DBs, and we had some talk yesterday about the good old boys up in Seattle having some issues with Wilson, throwing picks, and you have the good old boys that like to get on him about that. I just want to ask you, this kid, Josh Norman, when he was with Carolina, he was dominant. Now he's with Washington. Is he just all talk? Because we always talk about the quarterbacks that can or cannot throw passes. Richard Sherman got on Wilson for the interception that Pete Carroll should have given the ball to beast mode. But I think New England, they drove twice when Seattle had a 10-point lead on that defense. Norman and these good old boys talk a lot. Are they worth the money that they're getting? Because we always get on quarterbacks, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about a DB. All a DB has is a long stride and a short memory, Jonathan.
You're saying Richard Sherman has CTE, Big C? Is that what he said? He forgot he was on defense when Brady hit him for 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, he didn't remember that part. Brady throwing touchdowns on him. Okay?
Yeah,
he didn't remember any part of that game. All right.
Yeah.
He gave up touchdown passes.
Yeah.
And just like with Josh Norman. See, Sherman's getting all this publicity running his mouth in Seattle.
Yeah.
And because no one cares about him.
Yeah.
He's a defensive back. Defensive backs do not make ink unless they're running their mouth.
Yeah.
They're not a story. They're a secondary entity, just like they are in the secondary.
Yeah.
On a defense.
Yeah.
You only notice them when somebody throws a ball towards them.
Yeah.
That's it. And here's Norman running his mouth because, I got all this money in free agency last year. I didn't make the Pro Bowl. All these receivers ate me up in the AFC East.
Yeah.
So now I got to start talking because everybody's talking about Sherman. So I got to let people know I still exist. And to sit there and say something about all pro wide receivers.
Yeah.
The reason why they get to be all pros is because they're torching your butt. Okay?
Yeah, that's
they got clean marks all up and down your back. You can read and I tell you the thing about Josh Norman.
Yeah.
He can tell you every receiver's name that he plays against because he reads the name on the back of the plate on their shoulder.
That's funny, yeah. That's funny.
They're behind him. So when he sits there and runs his mouth about this guy's overrated, he's not this and that.
Yeah.
Ask him how many yards did he give up on the season.
Yeah.
That's how you gauge him. How many yards did Josh Norman give up on the season in receptions? How many receptions did he give up? He wasn't all pro, so he gave up a copious amount of them, Charlton.
Let me ask you this question then, because one of the guys that made even more notoriety for Norman is your friend Odell Beckham, who likes to take his shirt off like a lot of you dudes down south. There's some issues about he missed the OTAs, and I guess there was actually some talk. He's been out in California and has been doing some workouts with Chris Carter, former great out of the Minnesota Vikings and also out of Ohio State. Now, let me ask you, as a veteran player, I don't think it's as important, but I want your opinion. Is it as important for a veteran player to show up and have all the OTA, never miss an OTA? Does that matter for veterans, or should that just be something that's applicable to the rookie players? Big C, your thoughts?
There was a song that came out years ago, and it was called T-shirt and my panties on, okay?
You want me to sing it, DC? You want me to sing it?
Okay? You're running around with your T-shirts and your shorts on. You're not hitting anybody. It's about reps, okay?
Yeah.
And this is veteran players.
Yeah.
If you don't know the plays by now, being in your 4th, 5th year in the league,
yeah,
you're not going to know them.
Yeah.
Odell Beckham is not going to be displaced as the number 1 receiver with the New York Giants, okay? They need him as much as he needs them.
Yeah.
He is one of the qualified best receivers in the NFL.
Yeah.
And for him not to be at OTAs are voluntary workouts. These are the things that you need all these rookies in, all the free agents in, learning the new system that they're going to be participating in. If you look across the league, Charlton, with all the teams, I guarantee there's somewhere between 60 and 100 veteran players that are not showing up for the OTAs, okay?
Yeah. So as a
Beckham, he's easy print.
Yeah.
Now, if you talk about some offensive lineman not showing up, who cares? Nobody.
Yeah.
But Odell Beckham, we've seen him with his shirt off. So he's sexy.
Yeah.
And so let's keep the sexy guy up there. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Odell Beckham is going to go out and get you 80, 90 receptions, 1,400 yards, So how are the OTAs going to hurt Odell Beckham? They are not. Eli Manning needs them more than Odell Beckham because he's got to remember who his teammates are and not keep throwing interceptions.
So Eli needs glasses. Is that what you're saying? Eli needs glasses. I'm sure the Mara family can afford some class or even contact lenses for Eli, Big C. But could you imagine who he's going to throw the ball to this year? We talked about the greatness of the Raiders in the AFC with Carr throwing the ball to Cooper and Crabtree, and then Lynch coming out of the backfield. My goodness, Manning has Odell Beckham and Marshall right now. Who are you going to stop, Big C? They also have a pretty decent tight end over there, too. But those two teams are going to be, I think, at least it could be the championship games this year.
Also in the slot.
Yeah.
Rookie wide receiver from last year was in the second year out of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So they got a quadrant of receivers in New York that matches up with anybody. And we know when Eli gets hot, he can be hot, but he can also throw the ball to the opposing team when he feels like it.
Well, they just got to get his glass. He might be a little bit colorblind, Big C, and throw the ball to the right color that he's wearing, Big C. But, that's always exciting. I love the NFL, especially the talk of if someone missed practice or not. Who's that good old boy, Iverson, that made practice? Practice? You talk about practice? Man, I'm just trying to play the game, okay? So I think it's a lot overrated, but I do want to get your thoughts on the GM when you look at guys who are helped building teams, okay, before we get to the NBA and close out. Reggie McKenzie for the Oakland Raiders, I find it ironic that he was supposed to be fired about 2 years ago, but they hired Jack Del Rio, and Del Rio wanted to keep him around because a lot of the brass for the Raiders, they were tired of not winning, but it wasn't his fault. If you see what the patience has done, being patient, a little bit patient with a guy who has a winning pedigree, Big C, now McKenzie has the Raiders on the verge of at least getting to perhaps the AFC Championship game if they can reduplicate this year what they did last year before Carr got hurt. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's about building a foundation, and that's what they did. When you look at the draft that he put together a couple of years ago with Khalil Mack and Carr in that same draft, they hit home runs, and they followed it up with Cooper in the draft, another home run, and they've done well in free agency. They went out and signed this hulking offensive line, which has been the key to the Raiders. They drafted well in the secondary. But, McKenzie, being a former NFL player, understood what it took to put the right pieces in place. A lot of times teams go out and they get these, GMs that never played. They've always been front office people. They've been number pushers. And they don't know what it's like. You and I have had this conversation many times about the reporters. They never put on a jock.
No.
But they can tell you what's wrong with players.
Yeah.
They never put on a jock.
Yeah.
So unless you've had that intensity level of understanding what it takes to build and achieve on an athletic level, it's hard to understand.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the things I've always wondered, why haven't more former athletes gotten an opportunity to be the executives?
Yeah.
It's nice to be an executive telling people what to do, but it's also it's nice to understand what they go through in getting to that level of achievement.
Big C, I tell you, there's a lot of things going on in the world of the NFL. I love it. I'm kind of addicted to it the same way you like to be. You guys are addicted to moonshine, even though you say you could quit anytime you wanted to. I don't see anybody in that moonshine anonymous line or Hollis line. It's a good drink from what I hear. Also, just a little bit before we touch on the NBA and close out, motorsport this year, this weekend, Formula One and Monaco Grand Prix qualifying, and that's going to be this weekend as far as the NASCAR Xfinity Hints and the NASCAR Xfinity Hints 4K, and that's going to be great. The AMA Lucas Oil Pro Motocross, and that's going to be running around also the country this week. But I want to touch on one more thing before we close out today's program, Big C on Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. We know the Cleveland Cavaliers, they're facing the Golden State Warriors. That's the matchup everybody wanted to see. I even think people in Boston wanted to see Cleveland and Golden State just so they could see Durant versus LeBron James. I know Curry and Kyrie Irving, they'll cancel each other out, but I think Durant, LeBron James is what I want to see. And I think a lot of people want to see that. Just give me your thoughts on the temperature of how this series could be heading, and your thoughts, Big C. Go ahead.
Well, Charlton, this is the first time in history that you've had teams with this record get to there. The Warriors are 12-0, the Cavaliers are 12-1. But when you think about it, Charlton, in the last 10 NBA finals, there's only been 8 different NBA teams to participate in them.
Yeah.
So when you talk about collusion of a league and having dominant teams, the NBA stands by that. We talked about the NHL earlier, where you can have a 16 seed participate in the championship game.
Yeah.
You don't get that in the NBA. A lower seed team in the NBA never makes it to the finals, Charlton. It just doesn't happen. And if you're not winning your division or even the second seed, you're not getting there. But when you think about this is what everybody had talked about. The season was anticlimactic getting to this point. And even the playoffs proved that with the easy run that these teams had by double-digit victories in every game. They just blew teams away. But, this is what everybody wants to see. LeBron, this is his 7th consecutive NBA championship game, series that he's going to be in. The Golden State, this is their 3rd consecutive that they've been in. And everybody was saying, the Golden State really didn't need to do anything to tweak the team they had last year. Because the way they had gotten there with the all-time winningest record. But everything changes throughout sports. Even, people don't see the subtleties that Cleveland had. They've had 4 roster changes that were impactful on their roster this year, just like Golden State had. But, they bring in Kevin Durant. Everybody's saying that it's Kevin Durant's championship to lose. Well, Cleveland are the champs. They're the champs until they're unseated. And, Kevin Durant came to Golden State for his best opportunity to win a champ. He got a lot of backlash throughout the media, throughout the fan world, but who in the sports does not want to win a championship? It's like when LeBron went to Miami several years ago. Okay, he went to Miami to win a championship. He didn't go to Miami just to say, okay, I'm going to another team. He went to a team that had a pat hand when he had Bosh and Wade, Battier, Miller, several other great players that were down there.
Ray Allen.
They put players in place to win a championship, just like with Golden State. Now that, Durant has done the same thing, it's looked different because LeBron went back to Cleveland. But even when he went to Cleveland, Charlton, they loaded up. They brought in Love. They brought in J.R. Smith. They brought in several other players to help him get over the hump. Because they had a team when he left. So this is what the NBA has done. The NBA is creating a couple mega teams. That's all they're doing. They don't care about the small markets out there like we have in the NHL, where you got a team like Nashville and Pittsburgh playing for the championship. The NBA is building mega teams. They only want a couple teams that are going to be competitive throughout the year. Everybody else is just, they have fans that they'll go in and play in front of these fans in their local arenas. But the NBA is not interested in having parity. That's not what the NBA is built on. If you look throughout the history of the NBA, it's never been about parity. It's always been about having 4 dominant teams throughout the league. When everybody talked about the Lakers and Boston's rivalry, okay, there was only 4 dominant teams in the league then. Even when the Bulls were playing, there were only 4 dominant teams. The Bulls would always play either the Celtics or the Pistons in the playoffs in the championship team. And then whatever team came out of the West that they would play. And even when the Rockets were dominant, San Antonio, there's always only been 4 dominant teams in the NBA, Charlton, because it's like a repetitive cycle. You see them over and over, and that's what I meant. The last 10 NBA championships have only been participated in by 8 teams. So that's not having a large market available, Charlton. You have 30 teams, but you only had 8 competitive teams in the last 10 years in the NBA.
Big C, let me ask you just a few more questions before we close out on Big C Sports going into this great weekend coming up. I hope everybody's safe. I know the moonshine will be flowing down south, but I hope you good old boys don't drink and drive. I want to ask you a twist of irony, Big C, because this year's NBA Finals, we know everybody's talking about the marquee matchup, the 2 great franchises, but I want to ask you something that we talk about all the time, which is about equality and giving people a chance. Has anyone even talked about the 2 head coaches in this game, Tyronn Lue and Mike Brown, both being African-American coaches, oftentimes the first fired and the last hired, Big C? I just want to bring that up because there's 2 dominant teams, and they're both being run by African-American coaches, even though I hear some good old boys in the Bay Area saying, well, do you think Golden State can win without Steve Kerr? I think Brown is undefeated, Big C. Your thought on the 2 African-American coaches and the dominant basketball teams that they coach, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, let me give you this on Tyronn Lue. He's 1-0 in championship series, okay?
Yeah.
He's participated in 1 NBA championship run. He has 1 NBA championship. let's look at the Golden State Warriors on the other hand, Charlton, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not taking anything away from Steve Kerr as an outstanding coach in the NBA. But I go back 2 years ago when they won a championship, okay?
Yeah.
They set an NBA record for victories prior to the All-Star game, prior to him coming back on the bench.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
They were a better team without him as the head coach than they were even though they won the title.
Yeah.
The following year, they set an NBA record as far as victories, okay?
Yeah.
And they can't win a title with him as head coach.
Yeah.
All right. Since he's been out, Charlton, Golden State is, I believe, 20-1.
Yeah.
20-1. So, as I look at things, when Steve Kerr is not around, and I'm not taking anything away from Steve.
Oh, I understand. But
when Luke Walton was coaching, what were they, like 45-3?
Yeah.
Or something like that?
Yeah.
And now, with Mike Brown coaching at 20-1, and I'm not discounting the 73 victories they had a year ago.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at these two interim coaches that they've had, and they've been damn near perfect. So I'm trying to figure out which one, who's been the better coaches, Luke Walton, Mike Brown, or Steve Kerr?
Yeah.
So when people say, can they win without Steve Kerr, look at the two coaches on both sides of Steve Kerr.
Yeah.
Luke Walton and Mike Brown, compare their records in the same amount of games.
Yeah.
And compare Steve Kerr's record in the same amount of games, and figure out who the better of the three coaches are, Charles.
Well, Big C, I just want to say the same good old boys that are saying Colin Kaepernick, I think he's washed up. He only had 16 touchdowns and 4 interceptions last year. There are guys with 3 touchdowns and 5 interceptions getting an NFL job.
But Charles, Mike Glennon had 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions.
Yeah, I was surprised. Well, see, the thing I don't like about you always want to go with the facts. Why can't you just be an emotional person? If you were more emotional and less fact-driven, you could be with the Trump administration, Big C, but he probably won't return your resume, okay, Big C? Just your thoughts on that. I want to get your last thoughts going into this weekend. Going into the weekend, we have so much to talk about next week because we're going to be approaching the first game of the NBA Finals. But we talked about some football. We talked about some off-season OTAs. People that are missing. We talked about Lord Stanley's Cup, how much moonshine can fit in that Lord Stanley's Cup, Big C. Also, some race car driving going around the country. But I know you love it football more than anything else outside of basketball. Just give me your thoughts on what you're looking forward to going into this weekend, Big C.
Well, what I'm really looking forward to, Charlton, is Sunday. The 101th running of the Indianapolis 500 at the Brickyard in Indianapolis. Iconic, motor speedway. This is a place where legends have been made, Charlton, throughout the history of motor racing.
Yeah.
And the Indianapolis 500 is as much Americana as anything that we have out there, Charlton. When you think of the size and the history of this raceway and the legends of A.J. Foyt, and Mario Andretti.
Oh, yeah.
Helio Castanedas, and all the great drivers, Jackie Stewart, of bygone years that have gone around this raceway. And America is set on Sunday to watch this great race. The only thing that parallels this in racing, Charlton, is the Kentucky Derby.
Oh, yeah.
But they got 4 legs.
And they do it on mud, right? They do it on mud, Big C.
They got 4 legs and 1 horsepower versus 4 tires and about 1,500 horsepower.
Yeah.
But, it's just a great day in racing on Sunday in America, in America's Beltway.
Yeah.
And America, turns on the TV for that, as well as the 250,000 people that will attend the race in person, Charlton. Just a great part of America. It will get us kicked off into next week, into the NHL finals. We'll get into the NBA finals, and the OTAs will be over. Maybe we can let all this off-season talk about football and the crybabies rest for a minute and concentrate more on progress.
That's so funny. Speaking of crybabies, I hope that POTUS has that towel that Jerry Tarkanian used to have to wipe up his. I guess he had some moonshine on that towel, but he might need it for his tears. It's ironic that you hired your son-in-law to give him a job, and he's under investigated by the FBI. But I can tell you want to find out more about sports and politics, turn into Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, worldwide on the iHeartRadio network. Follow Big C Sports. As we always tell you for every program, there is never, ever any room for domestic violence. If you know any woman going through that garbage, just call 911. No woman should have to go through that garbage all on her own. And as we always tell you, on every program, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.